the business world, there is a term for what happened to Nokia. They call it the success trap. It's a psychological phenomenon where a company becomes so good at one thing that they become physically incapable of doing anything else. In 2007, Nokia was the undisputed king of the world. They had a 41% global market share. To put that in perspective, Apple's highest market share ever for the iPhone usually hovers around 20%. Nokia was double that. They were worth $250 billion. They had the largest R&D budget in the history of telecommunications. They had the smartest engineers from the best universities in Europe. And yet, in just 6 years, that empire didn't just shrink, it evaporated. It was sold to Microsoft for a measly $7 billion, a 97% loss in value. Most people will tell you that the iPhone killed Nokia. They'll tell you that Android killed Nokia, but they're wrong. Today, we open the vault on the internal sabotage, the culture of fear, and the secret project that could have saved the company if only they weren't too terrified to release it. Part 1. The Hardware King's Blind Spot. Nokia's story began in 1865. They didn't start with microchips. They started with paper and rubber. For over a century, Nokia was a physical company. They made boots, tires, and cables. When they pivoted to mobile phones in the 1980s, they brought that hardware DNA with them. To Nokia, a phone was a piece of industrial equipment. It needed to be durable, it needed to have a 10-day battery life, it needed to make crystal clear calls. And for 15 years, they were the best in the world at that. They created icons. The Nokia 3310 was so strong, it became a literal internet meme, the indestructible phone. But while Nokia was perfecting the plastic and the buttons, a silent revolution was happening in Silicon Valley. The world was shifting from hardware to software. Nokia's OS was called Symbian. It was a Frankenstein's monster of code. It was designed in the 90s for phones with tiny screens and number pads. To a developer, writing an app for Symbian was like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. It was slow, it crashed constantly, and it was ugly. But Nokia didn't care. Why would they? They were selling 400 million phones a year. They were blinded by their own spreadsheets. They thought that as long as the hardware was good, the software didn't matter. This was fatal mistake number 1, software myopia. They were building the best carriages in the world, while the rest of the world was building the internal combustion engine. Part 2, the secret savior, the MeeGo tragedy. Here's the part of the story most people don't know. Nokia did have an iPhone killer. It was a secret project called MeeGo. Inside a hidden lab in Finland, a rebel group of engineers realized Symbian was a sinking ship. They built a brand new operating system from scratch. It was beautiful. It used swiping gestures long before Apple or Android perfected them. It was fast, it was modern, and it was stable. They put it into a phone called the Nokia N9. When tech journalists finally got their hands on it, they were stunned. They said, "This is it. This is the phone that can take down Apple." But then, the empire struck back. Within Nokia, there was a civil war. The Symbian team was the old guard. They controlled the budgets. They had the power. They saw the MeeGo team as a threat to their jobs. Instead of helping the new technology, the old guard choked it. They starved the project of marketing money. They delayed the launch by years. By the time the N9 was ready for the public, the company's new CEO, Stephen Elop, did the unthinkable. He canceled the entire project before the phone even hit the shelves. He didn't want a Nokia OS, he wanted a Microsoft OS. They threw the only life jacket they had overboard while the ship was already half underwater. Part 3, the climate of fear. Why would a company cancel its best product? To understand that, you have to look at the psychology of the boardroom. A landmark study by Inside researchers found that Nokia's downfall wasn't a lack of talent. It was a climate of fear. As the iPhone and Android began to eat Nokia's lunch, the top executives became desperate. They became aggressive. They demanded that their managers produce iPhone killers on impossible timelines. Because the culture was so top-down and punishing, Middle managers realized that telling the truth was a career-ending move. If a manager stood up and said, "Our software isn't ready," or "Apple's tech is 5 years ahead of us," they were humiliated or pushed out. So the managers started lying. They sent up reports saying that Symbian was improving. They showed fake demos. They painted a picture of a healthy company while the engineers on the ground were panicking. This created a disconnection gap. The people at the top were making billion-dollar decisions based on a reality that didn't exist. They were flying a 747 into a mountain because the co-pilot was too afraid to tell the captain the engines were on fire. Part 4. The Trojan Horse. In 2010, Nokia made their final, desperate gamble. They hired Stephen Elop, the first non-Finnish CEO in the company's history. He came directly from Microsoft. Elop issued the famous burning platform memo, telling the staff that they were standing on a platform that was about to explode. He was right about the problem, but his solution was a disaster. He abandoned everything Nokia had built and signed an exclusive deal to use Windows Phone. This move effectively turned Nokia into a zombie. Overnight, they lost their unique identity. They weren't Nokia anymore. They were a Microsoft hardware subsidiary. Developers, who were already busy building for Apple and Android, had zero interest in a third, struggling platform. The sales didn't just drop, they cratered. Nokia's stock price fell by 60% in a single year. The once mighty king of phones became a laughingstock in the tech world. In 2013, in a final act of irony, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone business for $7 billion. Stephen Elop returned to Microsoft with a massive bonus, and the Nokia phone brand was essentially laid to rest. The autopsy, the myth of stability. Nokia didn't die because they were stupid. They died because they were too successful. They were so comfortable at the top of the mountain that they forgot how to climb. Today, Nokia is a successful company again, but they are a ghost of their former selves. They build the pipes of the internet, the 5G equipment and the routers. They are a B2B company that stays in the shadows. They survived, but they lost the world. The vested myth of Nokia is that they were out-innovated. The truth is, they were out-cultured. They were destroyed by ego, by fear, and by a refusal to admit that the world they created had moved on without them. In business, your greatest victory today is often the seed of your defeat tomorrow. If you want to see more corporate autopsies, subscribe to Vested Myths. We release new deep dives every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday.